Good morning, everybody. Gordy with the Arkansas Preparedness Network coming at you this morning. Today I want to talk to you about a handheld radio comparison and review. Bruce, one of the other admins at Arkansas Preparedness Network, has been after me for a while to do a review on some handheld radios. So that's what we're going to do today. I have several handheld radios here that I'm going to compare them and give you a little bit of a review on from a preparedness standpoint. So let's dive right into this. To start with, this little blue one here is one of my wife's. She's not a licensed ham radio operator. I am a licensed ham radio operator and have been licensed as an amateur radio operator for about 20 years. So I've been playing with radios like this for a little while. This little blue one here is the one that most people are familiar with. You can get it in multiple colors: blue, red, orange, yellow, camouflage, black, whatever your favorite color scheme is. It's the Baofeng UV-5R. They're less than $30 on Amazon. You can find them here and there. Occasionally you'll find somebody trying to sell them for around $100. Don't pay $100 for that radio. It's $25, $30 radio. For what it is, it's a good little radio, and I personally think it is an exceptional value for preparedness, especially for someone who is not going to get a ham radio license. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. The UV-5R for $30 can be programmed for a multitude of different frequencies. It's open, it's not locked down, so you can put a lot of different frequencies in it. Accessories for it are cheap. This is an extended battery, and I'll show you real quick. The battery just pops off the back, and this much larger battery just snaps right on, and this makes this radio talk time and standby time more than double compared to the small factory radio. As well as that is this one, which looks just like the extended battery pack. This is a rechargeable. This one takes double A's. So again, from a preparedness standpoint, being able to have something like that in your radio bag or whatever, so that if you can't recharge the battery on your radio, you can move to double A's. I think from an emergency preparedness standpoint, that's an important feature in a radio. Programming cable, if you want to do your own programming, there are some cheap $10 cables out there. I don't recommend those. They have problems with drivers. So if you're going to get your own programming cable, spend the $20 and get a good programming cable for these radios. And that same programming cable will work for these first three radios. The second radio here is basically the same thing as a UV-5R. This one, the model is, I forget exactly what the model number is on this thing, but it takes the same batteries. This is a Baofeng F9 Plus TP, and the TP stands for tri-power. So this first radio for about $30 puts out about 4 watts, which is adequate for community communications. If you're an amateur radio operator and you're using repeaters, this radio will more than likely reach a repeater near you. And all of these radios can be improved dramatically by taking off this little rubber duck antenna, putting an adapter on here so that you can hook an external antenna up. So you can hang an antenna in a tree or have one mounted on your house, or a magnetic mount on your car or whatever, if you wanted to take it for mobile operations. So having a better antenna for your radio will improve it dramatically. Don't think that you need a whole lot more wattage. Now again, more wattage is better, but a better quality radio and a good quality antenna make a lot more difference than moving to an 8-watt version radio. And this radio I have programmed at the 4-watt level, except for a few channels in here, but it's nice to have the 8 watts if I need it. This is the only 8-watt radio that I own. Probably will never buy another one. Let's go back to the UV-5R. I have more than a handful of these. My wife has one in her get-home bag. I have one in my get-home bag. There's this one. I think there's another one out in my Radio Shack. So it's a good idea. These radios are inexpensive enough that you can keep them around for a multitude of purposes. Now let's move on to this third one. This is a Baofeng UV-82. Now the UV-82 basically uses the same software as the other radios, the UV-5R and the Tri-Power. But as you can see, it's designed a little bit differently. The battery pack comes off a little bit differently. There's a lot more metal inside this radio. It's physically built better than the other ones. And it costs a little bit more. This one's a little over 30 bucks. And of course it doesn't take the same accessories. It does, however, have accessories available for it. Here is an extended battery pack for this radio. So you can get accessories for it. They're not as easily obtainable. Excuse my dog back here. They're not as easily obtainable as the ones for the UV-5R. The UV-5R, there are a lot of options out there. They're all very inexpensive. It's a great radio to keep in your bug out bag, get home bag, that kind of thing. Now, so that covers the three Baofeng models that I've got here. Now I want to move on to a real amateur radio. This is a Yaesu FT-65R. This radio costs about 140 bucks new. Right now it's on sale at R&L Electronics for about 115 bucks. This is a very good quality radio. This is a 5-watt radio, and when they say 5 watts, unlike these radios when they say it's a 5-watt radio but it really only puts out 4 watts, this is a 5-watt radio. This radio is actually built by a company called Vertex under the Yaesu brand, and the Yaesu brand is their amateur radio division of the Vertex Communications Company. Just like Kenwood and ICOM, they are commercial radio companies that make amateur radio products. What makes them less expensive is they aren't built maybe quite as well as the commercial products, and they don't go through all of the testing and have to pay the FCC for certifications and stuff that the commercial radios do. Now, this radio right here will do everything these three radios will do, with the exception of it doesn't transmit at 8 watts, and that's questionable on that radio anyway. Those are Chinese radios. This is a Japanese radio. This radio can easily be modified. Now, when it comes brand new, it is limited to where it transmits only in the amateur radio bands, but it can easily be modified through a software programming option where you can set this thing up into a certain menu and punch in a code, and it opens it up where it will transmit on just about anything that it hears, which is one of the nice things about the Baofengs, is they come that way and you don't have to get your soldering iron out or something like that. Well, this radio can actually be modified to transmit. Obviously you don't want to do that unless it's an emergency and there's life or property at risk, because you could get in trouble. But if you are looking for a good quality radio, I would highly recommend the FT-65R. Again, it's a little over 100 bucks, but it's well worth it. And if you're looking at getting your amateur radio license, or you already have your ham radio license, get a good quality radio. Don't depend on just these cheap Chinese radios as your primary radio, because they're not going to receive as well and they're not going to transmit as good a quality audio. These little Chinese radios, if you get them close to your home Wi-Fi router, you're going to hear a lot of what we call white noise. It's going to make a hissing sound and open up, and you won't hear anything else except the noise that your router is making. Fluorescent lights will sometimes do it. LED lights will sometimes do it. Again, you get what you pay for here. The $100 radio, you're not going to have that problem with. And when you key this thing up and transmit and you're talking to other people on the radio, they're going to hear you very well. It's going to be clear. There's not going to be any noise or anomalies in the sound of your voice with a good quality radio. And the last radio that I've got here, this is a Radioddity GD-77. And this radio is a digital radio. It's marketed to ham radio operators. it is a Chinese radio like the Baofengs. So the receive quality and the audio quality is not quite as good as a better quality radio. The nice thing about this radio, now let me say this right up front. If you're not a licensed ham radio operator, don't pay any attention to this radio. However, if you want to get your license and learn how radios work, because programming a digital radio is a whole lot different than programming an analog radio, which these are analog radios. The digital radios, however, DMR stands for Digital Mobile Radio, and it's a technology that was developed by Motorola, I think, under the Moto Turbo brand or something like that. Anyway, it's been opened up and made public without having to pay licenses for it. So the Chinese folks have started marketing this technology to ham radio operators. And the digital radio signal obviously does not, if you're listening to it with an analog radio, all you're going to hear is, it sounds kind of like a modem or something like that. A bunch of clicks and pops. And so if you are wanting to set up some communication method where you can be semi-secure, now obviously anybody else that has a DMR radio and has their radio programmed in a similar fashion than you do, they will be able to hear what you're saying. But that's going to limit your the people that can hear you dramatically. We're talking, 98% of the folks out there will not be able to hear what you're saying or not be able to understand what you're saying if you're using a digital mobile radio. So if you want secure communications, I would highly look into getting your ham radio license and learning, and look into DMR radios. This radio can be bought on Amazon for less than $100. Usually it sells for about $95. Occasionally it goes on sale for around $80. Once in a great while, $65. And this is not a bad quality radio. Now this radio is actually FCC type accepted for commercial use. That means that if you are a volunteer firefighter or work directly with the Department of Emergency Management or something like that, and they use DMR technology, you could get this radio and program it on commercial frequencies, and it's legal for you to use. I'm not going to go into the legalities a whole lot in this video, but legality is something that you definitely need to consider. If you don't get a license, using one of these radios could eventually get you in trouble. Now there is a radio similar to this one right here. This is a UV-82 that also comes in a C version, UV-82C or Charlie, and that is, it costs about $60, but it has gone through type acceptance with the FCC to be used on commercial frequencies. So again, Department of Emergency Management, volunteer firefighters, etc. could use that radio. They also make a radio, again, a little over $50, just like this one, that is FCC type accepted for MURS. MURS, Multi-Use Radio Service. That is a license-free radio service that uses 5 channels. If you want to stay legal and you want to provide communications for your group or whatever, I would highly recommend you buy the MURS radios. They're completely legal, absolutely no questions whatsoever as far as legality. They're decent little radios. Again, they are Chinese, and you're going to get a little bit of problems. There's going to be some noise and this and that. But if you want to stay legal and provide communications for your group, and you want to practice on a regular basis, which I highly encourage you do, actually I encourage you to go get your ham radio license and buy a good quality radio and get the folks in your group to get their ham radio license so that you can communicate. Using ham radio, you can communicate all over the world. In fact, this little radio right here, this DMR radio, I can connect to a local repeater that is connected to the internet, and I can talk to people on the other side of the world with this radio. I can talk to people in Australia, England, Germany, you name it. I can talk to people all over the world. Now, again, that's as long as the internet is working, but this is a great little radio if you want to get your license and get into it. So we've got cheap $30 radios. The 8-watt version, I want to say it's around $60. The UV-82 is a little bit better quality than these other two. It's built a little bit better, a little more solid. Same software, same programming cable, everything. and it is around 30 or 35 bucks, then a good quality ham radio. Take a good look at that. That's the Yaesu FT-65R. Get your ham radio license and get a good radio. Along with a handheld, get a good mobile radio. You can get a good mobile radio for less than $150 that will transmit 50 watts or more, so that you don't have any problems. Bruce, one of the admins of the APN, lives, as the crow flies, probably about 50 or 60 miles from me, and maybe not quite that far, but we can talk because he's up on top of a hill and I'm up on top of a hill. When we have our mobile radios connected to an external antenna, we can talk via simplex and not having to use a repeater, not relying on the internet. As long as we've got a little bit of electricity and a battery, then we're good to go. So again, this kind of goes back to this whole thing about me saying get training, get training, get training. Get your ham radio license, learn about this stuff. Somebody in your group needs to be a quote-unquote expert on communications. It could be you. So anyway, this video is long enough. Hopefully you find all of that information helpful. If you've got any questions, hit me up in the comments. I'll try and answer your questions. With that, I will say good morning to you, and I'll catch you next time.